Okay, welcome back, everyone. Parasha Insights today, as we mentioned, is going to be a little bit of an abbreviated session. We're going to dive right into one of the, I think, interesting points in the Parsha as we begin the new book of Bamidbar, and we're going to talk about one unique aspect of this book. The book of Bamidbar is the book of, well, it's the book of journeys. It's the book of numbers because it refers. There's a census that takes place at the beginning of the book. And it's one of the 5 books of the Torah, and yet there's a voice in our sages that say, wait a second, everything you thought you know about the Torah, right? Like how many books are there in the Torah? This is a basic. This is before you get in. This is part of the entrance examination to get into Judaism 101. We're not even teaching this in Judaism. Everyone knows this. How many books of Moses? Chamisha Chumshei Torah. There are 5 books of Moses, but wait a second. There's a voice in the Talmud which says, no, there are 7 books of Moses. What? 7 books of Moses? How is that possible? Well, in our Torah portion, it's a little bit of a trick question because it's not really 7 books. But in this Torah portion, we're going to have a separate book of Moses that consists of 2 verses, its own book, which means that what came before it is a book, and what came after it is a book, which gets us to 7 instead of 5. But we'll get there. So we are jumping right in, and the book is Vayehi b'nesoa Haron vayomer Moshe. When the ark was to set out, Moses would say, familiar. We use these verses, these verses are part of our prayers. At the time of the taking out and the putting back of the Torah, and then we add other verses, Kimi Tzion Teitzei Torah Dvar Hashem Yerushalayim, when we use this as part of our liturgy. But within the Torah portion, when we take out the Torah, this is what we say. And then when we put back the Torah, we say the second verse, Uvenu Cho Yomar. And when it halted and when the ark stopped moving, this is what was said: Shuba Hashem Rivavot Alfei Yisrael, return, O God, you who are Israel's myriads of thousands. Okay, so we have these verses that comprise its own book of the Torah, whatever that means. And if you look in the Torah scroll, and this is a photocopy from a tikkun from part of the Torah scroll, if you look in the Torah scroll, you see these verses that are very clearly separated from the rest of the Torah. And yet they're separated by these 2 letters. You see those 2 letters? That's what we're going to be focusing on. These are the letter nunn. Backwards letter nunn. Interesting. Okay, so we're going to look at, what is this all about? Why do we have these letter nunn? What does the letter nunn mean? What does it represent? So the Talmud in Tractate Shabbat says, "Va'ibin Zoram v'yomer Moshe Parasha zo asala Kadosh Baruch Hu simaniot milamala mata." God gave this portion signs, demarcations above and below. Lamar she'ein ze mekoma. So one opinion in the Talmud says, why are these things here? Well, it's almost like they're brackets. I mean, it's bracketing in this section. Right? This is unprecedented. We don't know what to make of this. There's nowhere else in the Torah where we have these random floating letters that are not to be pronounced a backwards nunn. How do you pronounce a backwards nunn? You don't. It's just there. It's just on the page. But how do you say it? I have no idea. So what's it doing there? And so the Talmud says, this is there just to bracket the passage, to let you know that it didn't really happen in this place, that what we're saying in this, the intended place of this passage is meant to be somewhere else in the Torah. Why it found its way here, how it found its way here, those are all separate questions, good questions, but separate questions, okay? And there's a second opinion, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, which is the opinion that we quoted before. He says, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi said, Lo min Hashem huzeh. It's not for that reason, El b'nei sefer chashuv hu b'pnei atzmo, because this is its own book. This is meant to demarcate these verses to show that it's something super important is happening here. And Rav Moshe Shapiro asked the question, this needs clarification, obviously. Our masters have not clearly explained why these verses are a separate book of the Torah. What do they contain that makes them a complete book? A complete book means that it unfolds an entire subject from beginning to end. What are we talking about? Moreover, it divides the book of Bamidbar into 3 books of the Torah, each of which must also be a complete book. What is the reason for this? So another passage, so he's setting up basically the question. The question is a relatively clear question, which is, what in the world do you mean that this is a separate book of the Torah? Now, the mirror image concept has to be looked at as well, because what's the notion of the mirror image? Because there are many ways. If you say, give me a letter nunn, but reverse it. So you have a number of different options how to reverse it. You could turn it clockwise or counterclockwise. You could turn it halfway. But reversal here is its mirror image. Ordinarily, letters are arranged so that a person who is sitting in front of them can read them. But these letters are arranged so that one who is seated opposite him can read them. Okay, so this, I'm trying to think of a way to explain this properly. And the only way, I didn't include it in the source sheet, but there's a beautiful Devar Torah, an insight of the Ishbitzer Rebbe. And the Ishbitzer Rebbe said the following, that if you look at Musaf on Shabbat, the core section starts with the words Tikanta Shabbat, Ratzita Korbanoteha, Tzivita Perusheha, Im Sidurei Nesacheha, Me'angeha Olam Kavod Yinchalu, Toamea Chaim Zachu, and so on. And the reason I'm able to recite it by heart is not only because I say it every week, but also because it's an acrostic. It's a reverse acrostic. Tikanta Shabbat. Taf Shin. So the equivalent in English of ZY. Ratzita Korbanoteha. X. W. I don't know. I can't do it backwards. But it's a backwards alphabet. If you look through, open up to the Siddur when we're finished to Musaf on Shabbat, and you'll find that the Musaf prayer is written uniquely in a reverse acrostic, starting with Taf Shin all the way to Az Misinai, Az being the Aleph. So it goes from Taf all the way to Aleph. And the Ishbitzer Rebbe says, well, why is this? Why do we go backwards? And he said, because when you write something backwards, who do you want to see it? Not you, but someone who is standing opposite you. You want them to see your perspective, right? I don't know. I do this sometimes when I'll be, we'll be driving somewhere with the kids in the car, and I'll get out and put gas in the car. So I'm standing there on the window, and I'll want to write something on the window. Let's say it's a foggy window. You have to write it backwards in order for them to be able to read it. And that's the idea of the Musaf on Shabbat, is that we're standing opposite God. And we want God to be able to read and to be able to understand what we're saying. And sometimes to communicate with someone else, you have to think from their perspective. And you can't only expect them to read over your shoulder or read the words that are in front of you. But that's the insight. So to go back to this obviously needs clarification. All right, mirror image. So we are putting the nunn in the inverse way, thinking about drawing on the window of a car so a kid inside could read it. So you're showing so that somebody opposite you can read it. That's how the nunns, to look back again, that's how the nunns are written, so that somebody reading from the other side, facing us, could read these nunns. If you could see through the page, and someone were on the other side of the page or the other side of our computer screen. The letter nunn becomes a very important letter because not only of its presence, but its absence. You might be familiar with Psalm 145. I have not included its translation for obvious reasons, because it doesn't matter. The psalm is Ashrei, and it's what we know as Ashrei, with the introduction being the phrase Ashrei. But then we jump into Psalm 45 with the words Tehillah LeDavid, a psalm of David, and then it's an acrostic. Aleph Bet Gimel Daled Hey Vav Zayin Chet Tet Yud Kaf Lamed Mem Samach Ayin Pei Tzadi Kuf Reish Shin Taf, from Aleph all the way to Taf. But the keen reader will note, wait a second, You skipped the letter nunn. Where is the letter nunn? Why is it missing from Ashrei? So the Talmud says, why is there no letter nunn in Ashrei? Mipnei mano lo nemar nunn ba'ashrei. Mipnei sheyesh b'mapalatam shel soni Yisrael. This is a fascinating thing, that the phrase sonei Yisrael, what does it mean, sonei? Lisno.
Enemies.
It's an enemy. It's to hate. Sonei Yisrael are the haters of Israel. This is a euphemism. This is the way the Talmud refers to Israel itself. The enemies of Israel. There are linguistic notions happening here. There's ayin hara notions happening here. The Talmud does this quite often. This is how the Talmud refers to asagi nahor, somebody in the Talmud who's referred to as someone who is helped by light, assisted by light. That refers to a blind person who is not assisted by light. So there's a language, and it's actually called lashon sagi nahor, a language of using the opposite to prove, using the opposite phrase to prove the positive. So because, why don't we have a nun? Because there is the downfall of Israel. Dichtiv nafla lo tusikum b'tulat Yisrael, because there's a verse in the book of Amos which talks about nafla, that Israel has fallen. And the word nofel in Hebrew, linpol ani nafalti, that starts with a nun, and therefore that's why nun is out, because nun represents falling, and we don't want nun there. And Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, but even so, what did David HaMelech do? Look back at the Psalm. This is where the nun would have been. Here's mem, and then after that is nun. And then David HaMelech said, we're going to drop the nun, but you know what? You know what the next, because nun represents falling, but in the next phrase we have the word falling. But look at the context. Somech Hashem l'chol hanoflim. God gives support to all who have fallen. So the nun is there, just the nun is in a different context. The nun is not in the context of falling, but of helping up those who have fallen, of supporting those who have fallen. And that's what the Talmud says. So wait a second, what does the nun represent? Does it represent falling, or does it represent those who have fallen who are able now to get up? Which is it? It's a little bit of both. And so what the Vilna Gaon points out is something very interesting. So does anybody know offhand how many letters are there in the Hebrew alphabet? Anyone remember learning this? I'm sorry?
22.
22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. So what's the middle letter? Or I guess if it's an even number, it's going to be the two middle letters.
Nunn. Mem and nun. No.
What base came off the holiday?
So if you have 22 letters, you're going to have 10 letters, and then two middle letters, and then 10 more letters. So the 10th letter of the alphabet is Yud. So the two middle letters of the alphabet are Kaf and Lamed. However, look at this. There are not 22 letters in the alphabet as we were all taught. There are actually 27 letters of the alphabet, because 5 of the letters are doubled.
Right.
5 of the letters have a Sophite form, or a form as they are written at the end of the alphabet. And so if we add these final forms, so look, I can't highlight here, but look at the mem has a final form, the nun, the pei, the tzadi, the kaf, right? They all have final forms. So if you include these, so then you have 27, you have an odd number, so you have 13, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So the mem is going to be the middle letter. Very good. The mem. Now all is safe again. The mem, and I think, by the way, the reason we say mem and nun is probably because of our affiliation or association with the English alphabet, and thinking of M and N as the middle of the. I haven't counted letters of the English alphabet lately, but I think we're imposing. But actually, 22 letters, Kaf and Lamed, are going to be the middle letters. However, there's another way of another order to the letters, because why are you putting these letters right next to their pairs? Maybe there's a different way. And by the way, these are all images that are just out there on the amazing internet. And it was bashert, because some put it according to one way, which is to put the final forms next to the non-final forms, and another one puts the final forms at the end of the alphabet. Let's just lump them together at the end of the alphabet, because that's where they go. They are the final forms. And actually, in the system of gematria, this is where they go as well. They have much greater values than the smaller forms, so they go towards the end. In the first way of organizing letters, the middle letter is mem. And the second way of organizing letters is the simpler order, he says, and there the middlemost letter is the letter nunn. If you push those end letters to the end of the alphabet, then your middlemost letter, then you have 13, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, 13, and then your 14th letter, which is going to be the middle letter of a 27-letter alphabet, is nunn and not mem. Good. So
Can I see the chart with the sofit again? The letters that have the sofit.
this one, sure.
So I'm just wondering why they have a sofit, not the others. Okay.
Why would say that again? Why?
I'm trying to think why the others don't have a sofit.
Why other letters don't have a sofit?
Yeah.
Like why a bet doesn't have a sofit?
Yeah, but I
Good
didn't
question.
think of one with it, so I guess that's it.
Excellent question. And the idea of a sofit letter of a final form is something that's not unique to Hebrew. Other Semitic languages have it. Actually, in Arabic, there are four versions for every letter. There's how the letter appears when it stands alone, how the letter appears when it precedes another letter, how the letter appears when it's between two connecting letters, and how the letter appears as a final letter. There are 4 different versions of it. And the English language used to have similar. The letter S used to have, if you ever have read Old English and you've seen that, what we call in German the Sz, or the double S, the thing that looks like the letter B. We're seeing German, like even the German word for street, Strasse.
Rasha, yeah.
The S, those two, the double S at the end of that, Strasse, is written often as that letter B with a long tail. That's an S. And if you look at Old English, that's how the letter S was often written. The letter that we know as S's was the final form of the S, how it appeared at the end of a word. But if you would see an S in the middle of a word, it would appear as a B, as what we would know as a capital B today. So there are many linguistic variants and nuances to this. Why these particular letters? Ich weiß nicht. Okay, the concept of letter nunn as the middlemost letter parallels the general concept of the middle. It must always stand on its own, and it can never be supported by anything else. The center point of a thing is considered its core essence. All other things, all expansions, all corollaries are sustained by something else, and they support each other. But the central point, the true essence, cannot stand except in its own right. The essence, the fulcrum, the middle, needs to have its own sense of independence. It needs to stand on its own. And as a way of demonstrating this, he's quoting a really remarkable midrash, which quotes the beautiful phrase, right? This is in Bilam, in the curses of Bilam, which turn into the blessing. As I see them from the mountain tops, gaze on them from the heights. Hen am levadad ishkon. They are a nation that dwells apart, or that dwells alone. The Hebrew word boded, right? Boded comes from the Hebrew word levad. Levad means alone.
Oh.
Boded. You know what hit bodedut means? The act of being alone. In Hebrew, hit bodedut is meditation.
Oh, good.
So that same word, livadad, alone, separate. It's a nation that dwells separate of agoyim, lo yitchashev, not reckoned among the nations. And so this is seen as a curse and a blessing. A nation that dwells apart, a nation that dwells alone. And the Midrash looks at this word for they, hein. They are. and says, what a fascinating word. Hey, nunn. What do hey and nunn have in common? Well, firstly, we can say the numerical value. You know what the numerical value of hey is?
Yeah. 5.
Good. And the numerical value of nunn
Oh, you can't go so far so fast.
40,
is 50.
50. Oh,
50.
all right.
So the 5 and 50. Oh, I'm seeing a pattern. 5 and 50. So look at how the Midrash, and this is the source that we're going to close with, but look at how the Midrash makes this point. Hein am levodad yishkon. Mahu hein. What do we mean when we say hein? They are kol haotiot mizdavkim chutz mishtei otiot halal. All of the letters, mizdavgim. Mizdavgim is a word, it comes from the Hebrew word zug. Zug is a pair or a couple. So all of the letters couple off. It's not referring in an intimate matter, but all the words pair off. Chutz mishtei otiot halal, except for these 2 letters. Ketzad, what are we talking about? Aleph and Tet, which represents 1 and 9. Hare Yud, that makes 10. Bet and Chet, 2 and 8. Hare Yud, that makes 10. Gimel and Zayin, 3 and 7. Dalet and Vav, 4 and 6. All of that makes 10. Nimtza he le'atzma. The 5 is left alone, meaning you've got 9 dance partners, and they're all, and it's middle school. I don't know if you had that as well, but one of the traumatic memories of my youth is middle school square dancing and ballroom dancing, where they took in public middle school and they taught us how to do it. And so they lined the boys up on one end of the gym and the girls up on the other end of the gym, and they said, find a partner, which is probably one of the most awkward things that you could ask 7th and 8th years to do. And I think that was part of the rite of passage, was seeing how we met. So in that sense, all of the letters from 1 to 9, Aleph through Tet, are there and saying our purpose is to make 10. That's what we're here for. So go and pair off. So everyone finds their complement. Hey has no complement. Nimtza hey le'atzma. Hey was left alone. V'chein ha'ot nun. And the same thing for nun, for 50. Ein la zug has no pair. Yud and Sadi, 10 and 90. Hare Kuf, that makes 100. 20 and 40, Kaf and Pei, that makes 100. Lamed and Ayin, 30 and 70, that's 100. Mem and Samech, 40 and 60. Hare Kuf, that makes 100. Nimtza nun la'atzma, 50 is left alone, Nebuch. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so God said, Keshem sheshnei otiot halalu einon yicholim lizdaveg kol otiot el la'atzman, just as these 2 letters can't find a partner and have to basically be with themselves or remain alone, Hach Yisrael einan yicholim lidabek kol ovdei kochavim mazlor hakadmonim elo la'atzman meforashim. So too Israel will not find a natural partner and will have to find its strength amongst itself. That's Hein am levadad yishkon. Hey and nun representing independence, the middle, the core. It's not looking for a complement in order to gain its value or its worth. It's going to have to find its own meaning in itself. And that's the letter nun. That's what we talk about, the nun being the middle letter of the alphabet. That's what we talk about, the nun. And if you're depending on yourself, everything relies. And so is it good? Is it bad? Is it noflim? Or is it somech Hashem l'chol noflim? Is it nafla? Is it something that represents falling? Or is it something that represents getting up and going back to the beginning? Vayihi bin soa ha'aron. And so when we see this inverted letter nun, and we haven't answered all the questions because this is an abbreviated version, we're not going to answer all the questions today, but we're going to gain an insight into how our sages saw this amazing letter nun. They saw this letter as everything hinging on it, which now brings us back to this passage. And when we see the 2 nuns, again, it could have been any letter. Why do we have a tradition of the letter nun? Why couldn't we have done backwards alephs? Why couldn't we have done backwards bets, which are a similar, backward chafs? It all looks the similar. Backward ratios, I would have gotten the point. Why do I need these letters at all? And so the message that we're getting is that nunn represents the core, nunn represents independence and being separate. And now looking at these verses, what we're supposed to say to ourselves, knowing all this, is something really important must be going on here. Something really crucial is being taught to us within these verses. And that's why the sages look at these verses and say, these aren't just verses. This is a sefer bifnei atzmo. This is a whole, its own topic. There is so much to look at here. And now we know to focus on it. So this whole teaching was not about the verses themselves, but about how the Torah turns on a spotlight. And by putting these nunns, indicates to us just how important, just how central to our existence and to the definition of Israel. Hen am levadad yishkon, the 5, the 50, the value of independence and separation that we're gaining from these letters. So that's what I wanted to look at today. These majestic nunn. So what did we look at today? We looked at 2 letters that are not even pronounced, that are not even articulated when we read the Torah, but you better believe they're there, and you better believe that we're supposed to be paying attention to them and not just reading over them or ignoring their existence. Any questions or comments?
Well, yes, you could take it to yourself and that you stand for your own independence. That's how I interpret it. But I wanted to just get back to your ballroom class. What happens if there's an odd number and no one has a partner?
That's what the nunn and hay have to do, and that's the awkward situation where you know there's always going to be 3 who are trying to dance together and alternate and figure it out.
But there's always a solution, and then the teacher will dance with the one who's alone.
Yeah, maybe.
So there's always a partner.
Exactly. Perfect. Any other questions or comments before we say hello and goodbye to this quick session?
You know, I just want to say one thing. It's this, the nunn to me is the very special, unique person, the unique tribe, the unique people. And that's what we are. And we have to, I mean, it would be very nice if we could have friends, but we don't. I mean, we have people we could call friends, but real friends are there for you and help you out when things happen. Right. And I also saw that the special needs kids are like the nunn. They have a special language, and you always have to find a way to get to them by understanding how they learn. And they learn, each one of them, we all learn in different ways, but special needs kids on the autism spectrum, as well as all the other kinds, you have to find that path inwards. They're like the nunn. It's just not like all the others. I don't know if I'm getting my point across, but
I love that. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good insight. Okay, thank you all. Wishing you a Shabbat Shalom, and for those who are able, we hope to see you tonight at the big concert at the Shar. Take care, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank